December 18, 1944, Hürtgen Forest, Germany. Unteroffizier Klaus Dietrich pressed his body against the frozen earth as 8 metallic pings rang out simultaneously from the American positions 40 meters ahead. His hands trembled as he gripped his carabiner 98K, not from cold, but from the knowledge of what those sounds meant. The distinctive 8-note symphony of M1 Garand clips ejecting had just announced that 8 American riflemen were reloading. His squad had exactly 2.7 seconds to assault the position before those rifles were operational again. This was impossible. Everything about combat mathematics said this moment represented opportunity. Empty rifles meant vulnerable enemies. German doctrine had trained him to recognize reload gaps and exploit them ruthlessly. Yet Dietrich remained frozen, watching 3 of his comrades rise to charge and immediately collapse as concentrated rifle fire tore through them. The Americans weren't reloading, they were hunting. The distinctive ping that every German soldier had been taught to listen for, the sound that supposedly revealed American weakness, had become the most terrifying audio signature on the Western Front. What German intelligence had identified as a critical flaw in American rifle design was systematically killing Wehrmacht infantry at rates that exceeded machine gun effectiveness. The mathematics of this tactical deception were being written not in training manuals, but in the corpses of German soldiers who had believed what their officers told them about American rifle vulnerability. The systematic slaughter had begun 3 years earlier, when the United States Army adopted a weapon that would transform infantry combat through a combination of firepower, psychology, and deliberate tactical deception that German planners never anticipated. The M1 Garand entered American service on January 9, 1936, after 16 years of development by Canadian-born designer John Cantius Garand at Springfield Armory. The United States became the first nation to equip its entire infantry force with a semi-automatic rifle, giving American soldiers a rate of fire advantage that would prove devastating in combat. By December 1941, approximately 600,000 M1 rifles had been manufactured. By war's end in August 1945, production would exceed 5.4 million units across multiple contractors, including Springfield Armory, Winchester Repeating Arms, International Harvester, and Harrington and Richardson. The weapons specifications seemed unremarkable to European military analysts who examined captured examples and technical intelligence reports. The M1 Garand weighed 9.5 pounds, fired the standard .3006 Springfield cartridge through a 24-inch barrel, and fed from an 8-round en-bloc clip that loaded from the top of the action. The semi-automatic gas-operated mechanism allowed sustained fire of 40 to 50 aimed rounds per minute, compared to 15 to 20 rounds per minute from bolt-action rifles that equipped German, British, Soviet, and Japanese infantry. German military intelligence received their first detailed M1 Garand analysis in July 1942, when Oberst Reinhard Gehlen's Foreign Armies West Section examined rifles captured from American forces in North Africa. The technical assessment, classified Geheim, secret, and preserved in captured Wehrmacht documents, contained observations that would prove tragically misleading. The American M1 rifle represents advanced mechanical design, but incorporates a critical tactical weakness. The weapon uses an en-bloc clip system that ejects the empty clip with a distinctive metallic sound after the 8th round is fired. This audible signature reveals precisely when the American soldier is reloading, creating a vulnerability window of approximately 3 seconds during which the rifleman cannot fire. German infantry should be trained to recognize this sound and immediately assault American positions during the reload period. The semi-automatic mechanism provides high rate of fire, but this tactical liability negates the advantage. This assessment was distributed to Wehrmacht training commands in August 1942 and incorporated into infantry combat instruction. German soldiers were taught to identify the M1 Garand's ping, count American rifle fire, and attack during perceived reload vulnerabilities. thousands of German infantrymen would die discovering that American tactics had transformed their supposed advantage into a death trap. The roots of this miscalculation lay not in German analytical failure, but in fundamental misunderstanding of how American infantry doctrine integrated individual weapons into coordinated fire systems. The distinctive ping of the M1 Garand's ejecting en bloc clip resulted from specific engineering choices that John Garand made during the rifle's development between 1920 and 1934. The en bloc clip system, where ammunition and clip loaded together into the rifle's action, allowed for rapid reloading compared to manually inserting individual cartridges into internal magazines. When the last round fired, the bolt cycled backward, ejected the empty clip through the top of the action, and remained locked open to facilitate immediate insertion of a fresh clip. The clip itself was a precisely stamped piece of spring steel weighing 2.8 ounces. When ejected under spring pressure after the 8th shot, it tumbled through the air, producing a two-part sound, the initial spring-loaded ejection creating a sharp metallic ring, followed by the clip striking whatever surface it landed on. The combined effect was unmistakable to anyone within 30 meters, a distinctive 8-note chime that announced the rifle was temporarily empty. Private First Class Robert Leckie, serving with the 1st Marine Division on Guadalcanal in August 1942, described the sound in his 1957 memoir, Helmet for My Pillow. That ping became as familiar as our own heartbeats. In the chaos of combat, you couldn't always see your fellow Marines, couldn't always hear their voices over the gunfire and explosions. But that metallic chime cutting through the noise told you that somewhere nearby, an American rifleman had just put 8 rounds toward the enemy and was reloading. It was oddly comforting, that sound. It meant Americans were still fighting, still in the battle. Japanese forces on Guadalcanal were the first enemy to systematically attempt exploiting the reload gap. Japanese infantry, trained in aggressive close-quarters tactics emphasizing bayonet charges and night infiltration, believed the ping provided the tactical opening their doctrine required. Sergeant Yukio Tanaka, captured on Guadalcanal in November 1942, told interrogators about instructions his unit received. "We were told the American rifle makes a loud sound when empty. Our officers said this was the Americans being foolish, making weapons that reveal weakness. We were ordered to listen for this sound and attack immediately with bayonets. Many men tried this. None survived. The Americans were never actually empty when the sound happened. There were always more Americans with loaded rifles covering the man who reloaded. This was the critical element German intelligence failed to understand when analyzing the M1 Garand's tactical characteristics. American infantry doctrine, evolved from lessons learned in World War I, emphasized coordinated fire at the squad level. A typical American rifle squad in 1943 consisted of 12 men, one squad leader armed with an M1 Garand, one assistant squad leader with an M1 Garand, 4 riflemen with M1 Garands, 1 Browning automatic rifle gunner, 1 bar assistant gunner with an M1 Garand, and 3 men operating as scouts, messengers, or ammunition carriers, all armed with M1 Garands. This meant 8 to 10 M1 Garands firing in coordinated patterns. Staff Sergeant William McReynolds, who served as squad leader in the 4th Infantry Division from Normandy to Germany, explained the tactical reality in a 1988 interview. The Germans got this idea that the ping meant vulnerability. What they didn't understand was that we never all reloaded at the same time. The squad operated as a unit. If my rifle pinged, 7 other rifles were still in action, providing covering fire. We practiced this constantly, coordinated fire discipline where shooters reloaded in rotation, never leaving the squad without suppressive fire. The bar gunner provided continuous support while riflemen reloaded. The Germans who tried to rush us during reload gaps ran into a wall of 30-06 fire from the rest of the squad. The semi-automatic mechanism of the M1 Garand created a rate of fire advantage that fundamentally altered infantry combat mathematics. The German Karabiner 98K, standard rifle of the Wehrmacht Infantry, required manual operation of a bolt mechanism between shots. A well-trained German rifleman could fire approximately 15 aimed rounds per minute, sustaining this rate for perhaps 2 minutes before muscle fatigue in the bolt hand reduced effectiveness. The M1 Garand, requiring only trigger pressure between shots, allowed sustained fire of 40 to 50 aimed rounds per minute indefinitely. This 2.7.1 firepower advantage at the individual level created devastating effects when multiplied across squad and platoon organizations. Consider the tactical mathematics of a firefight engagement. A German infantry squad in 1943 typically consisted of 10 men organized around a single MG-42 machine gun. 8 riflemen armed with Karabiner 98K rifles provided security and support for the machine gun, which represented the squad's primary firepower. In a sustained firefight, the 8 German riflemen could collectively deliver approximately 120 aimed rounds per minute. An American rifle squad with 8 M1 Garands could deliver approximately 320 to 400 aimed rounds per minute from rifles alone, before counting the Browning automatic rifle. This 2.7.1 advantage in rifle fire meant that American squads matched or exceeded the total firepower output of German squads, even without their automatic weapons engaged. Major General Norman Cotter, Assistant Division Commander of the 29th Infantry Division, who famously led troops off Omaha Beach on June 6, 1944, assessed the M1 Garand's impact in a post-war report. The semi-automatic rifle transformed our tactical doctrine. We could suppress enemy positions with rifle fires alone, something impossible with bolt-action weapons. German infantry doctrine centered on the machine gun as the primary weapon. Our doctrine made every rifleman a suppressive fire asset. When engaging German positions, we could generate sufficient rifle fire to keep enemy heads down while maneuvering elements advanced. The Germans couldn't reciprocate because their bolt-action rifles lacked the volume of fire necessary for effective suppression. This firepower disparity created the foundation for the psychological warfare that would transform the M1 Garand's ping from liability to weapon. American infantry began exploiting the reload gap psychology in late 1942 as combat veterans from Guadalcanal, North Africa, and other early campaigns identified patterns in enemy behavior. German and Japanese forces were actively listening for the distinctive ping and attempting to assault during perceived vulnerabilities. Rather than modify tactics to minimize the sound, American units began deliberately weaponizing it. The technique was simple, but devastatingly effective. Riflemen carried empty en-bloc clips and would strike them against rocks, helmets, or rifle stocks to simulate the reload ping while their weapons remained fully loaded. When enemy forces charged expecting vulnerable opponents reloading, they encountered concentrated fire from fully loaded rifles. The practice spread through informal networks of combat veterans teaching replacements. By mid-1943, the fake reload tactic had become common knowledge among experienced American infantry units, though it was never formally incorporated into official training manuals or tactical doctrine. Corporal Paul Fussell, who served with the 103rd Infantry Division in France and Germany, described the technique in his 1989 book, Wartime: Understanding and Behavior in the Second World War. Everyone knew about the ping trick by late 1944. We'd be in position, watching German infantry advance cautiously across open ground. Someone would bang an empty clip against their helmet, creating that distinctive sound. The Germans would immediately sprint forward, expecting us to be vulnerable while reloading. We'd cut them down with fully loaded rifles. It worked again and again because German training had drilled into them that the ping meant opportunity. They couldn't resist taking advantage, even though the tactic must have killed thousands of them by war's end. The psychological impact of this deception extended beyond immediate tactical effects. German soldiers who survived encounters with the fake reload tactic faced an impossible dilemma: ignore the ping and miss potential opportunities to assault vulnerable positions or respond to the ping and risk charging into a deliberate ambush. Gefreiter Ernst Steinbach, captured near Aachen in October 1944, described the psychological toll during interrogation. The American rifle sound became a terror. We knew it might mean they were reloading. We also knew it might be a trick to make us attack. There was no way to know which was real. Some men stopped responding to the sound entirely, accepting that we had lost whatever advantage it might provide. Others continued charging when they heard it, hoping to be faster than American reaction times. Most who charged died, but some positions were genuinely vulnerable and could be taken. We had no way to determine which was which. This uncertainty was worse than knowing we were always at a disadvantage. The actual vulnerability window created by M1 Garand reloading was significantly shorter than German tactical doctrine assumed. Wehrmacht training materials suggested a 3-second gap during which American riflemen could not fire. Combat testing and veteran testimony revealed the actual period was dramatically less. Technical Sergeant James Hendricks, weapons instructor at the infantry school at Fort Benning, Georgia, conducted reload timing studies in 1943 using combat veterans as test subjects. His report, preserved in Army training archives, documented that experienced riflemen could execute a complete reload in 1.2 to 1.5 seconds under combat conditions. The sequence involved hearing the ping as the clip ejected, 0.2 seconds, retrieving a fresh clip from ammunition belt or bandolier, 0.3 to 0.5 seconds, inserting the clip into the rifle's action, 0.4 seconds, releasing the bolt to chamber the first round, 0.3 seconds, and acquiring a target through the sights, 0.3 to 0.4 seconds. The fastest recorded reload time was 0.9 seconds, achieved by Staff Sergeant John Basilone. Medal of Honor recipient who had used his M1 Garand to kill 38 Japanese soldiers during a single night action on Guadalcanal. Even average riflemen with minimal combat experience completed reloads in under 2 seconds. German infantry, attempting to exploit the reload gap needed to, recognized the ping sound, 0.3 seconds reaction time, make the decision to charge, 0.2 to 0.5 seconds, rise from covered position, 0.5 seconds, and sprint across the distance to American positions. At typical engagement distances of 30 to 50 meters, a running soldier covered approximately 5 meters per second, requiring 6 to 10 seconds to close the distance. The mathematics were brutally simple. American riflemen could reload and fire 3 to 7 times before charging Germans covered half the distance. Even if the specific rifleman whose weapon had pinged was genuinely reloading, the rest of his squad remained in action throughout the entire German assault. Obergefreiter Martin Steiner, who survived 3 separate charges attempting to exploit M1 Garand reload gaps during fighting in Normandy, described the tactical reality in a 1946 interview. The training told us we had 3 seconds. In reality, we had perhaps 1 second before the rifle was operational again. But it didn't matter because we weren't charging a single man with an empty rifle. We were charging a squad of Americans with 7 or 8 loaded rifles, a Browning automatic rifle, and often a machine gun. The sound was a death sentence disguised as an opportunity. The urban combat in French and German cities created acoustic environments where the M1 Garand's ping became even more psychologically devastating. Buildings and narrow streets amplified and echoed the metallic sound, making it impossible to determine the exact location or number of riflemen reloading. German infantry would hear multiple pings apparently coming from different directions simultaneously, creating paralyzing uncertainty about where vulnerabilities actually existed. Lieutenant Heinrich Bauer, commanding an infantry platoon during the Battle for Aachen in October 1944, described the acoustic warfare in a diary recovered after his death. The American rifle sound echoes through these ruined streets like bells announcing our doom. We hear it constantly. from every direction, sometimes seeming to come from behind us or above us. My men freeze when they hear it, not knowing whether to charge forward, retreat backward, or take cover. The Americans have turned a mechanical sound into a psychological weapon that is killing us more effectively than their bullets. The impact on German tactical planning became evident in after-action reports and combat assessments generated by Wehrmacht units facing American forces. Oberst Gerhard Wilk, commanding the garrison defending Aachen, wrote in a September 1944 report to higher headquarters, "American infantry tactics exploit their semi-automatic rifle advantage to create sustained, suppressive fire that pins our forces in place. The distinctive sound of their rifle clips ejecting has become problematic for morale. Men who have been trained to exploit this supposed weakness have seen too many comrades killed attempting to do so. Unit cohesion suffers when soldiers doubt the tactical doctrine they have been taught. We request updated guidance on appropriate responses to American reload periods." No updated guidance was ever issued. German High Command had no effective response to the tactical reality that the supposed vulnerability was actually a trap. The M1 Garand's firepower advantage extended beyond rate of fire to ammunition capacity and reload speed. The 8-round en-bloc clip provided double the immediate ammunition capacity of the standard 5-round stripper clips used to charge the Karabiner 98K's internal magazine. While this seems like a modest advantage, it created significant tactical effects in sustained firefights. A German rifleman with a full 5-round magazine and 30 additional rounds in stripper clips could maintain approximately 10 minutes of sustained fire before exhausting ammunition, assuming a rate of 15 rounds per minute and time spent reloading individual clips. An American rifleman with a full 8-round clip and 72 additional rounds in en-bloc clips, the standard load of 9 clips total, could maintain approximately 16 minutes of sustained fire at 40 rounds per minute. More significantly, the American soldier reloaded 9 times during that period, each reload taking 1.2 to 1.5 seconds. The German soldier reloaded 6 times, each reload taking 5 to 8 seconds as he manually inserted a stripper clip and then pushed 5 rounds down into the internal magazine. Total reload time for the American was approximately 12 seconds across the engagement. Total reload time for the German was approximately 36 to 48 seconds. This meant the German riflemen spent 6 to 8% of the engagement unable to fire, while the American spent less than 2%. In a 10-minute firefight, the German was combat ineffective for approximately 40 seconds. The American was combat ineffective for approximately 12 seconds. Multiply this across an 8-man rifle squad, and the disparity became overwhelming. Staff Sergeant Audie Murphy, who had become the most decorated American soldier of World War II, described the practical impact in his 1949 memoir, To Hell and Back. "The Germans couldn't keep up. We'd engage a position, pour fire into it continuously, reload faster than they could, and maintain pressure until they either died, surrendered, or retreated. Their bolt-action rifles meant they were constantly working the bolt, constantly reloading, constantly vulnerable. Our Garands just kept firing. The psychological effect was as important as the tactical advantage. German soldiers knew they were outgunned at the individual level, and it affected their willingness to engage. The industrial capacity that allowed the United States to equip every infantryman with an M1 Garand represented a strategic advantage that matched the tactical benefits. Springfield Armory, Winchester, International Harvester, and Harrington and Richardson produced 5.4 million M1 rifles between 1936 and 1945. An average of approximately 50,000 rifles per month. German production of the Karabiner 98K totaled approximately 14.6 million units between 1935 and 1945, but Germany also produced over 400,000 Gewehr, 43 semi-automatic rifles, approximately 100,000 STG-44 assault rifles, and various other small arms. The key distinction was that American production focused on a single standardized rifle design, while German production was fragmented across multiple weapon systems. This standardization created logistical and training advantages. American armorers needed to maintain expertise on one rifle design. Supply chains delivered one type of ammunition, one set of spare parts, one manual. German logistics handled multiple rifle types with different maintenance requirements, different ammunition in some cases, and different training protocols. Major John George, chief of the Small Arms Section at the Infantry Board at Fort Benning, assessed the M1 Garand's strategic impact in a 1946 report. The decision to standardize on the M1 Garand as the primary infantry weapon provided advantages beyond the rifle's tactical characteristics. Every American soldier trained on the same weapon system. Every supply depot stocked the same parts. Every armorer developed deep expertise on a single design. When soldiers transferred between units, they already knew their weapon. When replacements arrived, they were immediately effective because they had trained on the same rifle. The Germans fragmented their small arms production across multiple designs, diluting their effectiveness. We concentrated ours on the best design and achieved dominance through simplicity. The training pipeline that prepared American soldiers to use the M1 Garand effectively demonstrated the systematic approach that characterized American military organization. Basic training for Army infantry in 1943 allocated approximately 80 hours to rifle marksmanship, double the time spent on any other individual skill. Recruits fired approximately 1,000 rounds through their M1 Garands during basic training, developing muscle memory and confidence in the weapon. German infantry training in 1943, constrained by ammunition shortages and accelerated training cycles due to mounting casualties, provided approximately 40 hours of rifle training and 300 to 400 rounds of live ammunition. Late-war German infantry divisions contained significant percentages of soldiers who had fired fewer than 100 rounds before entering combat. The ammunition expenditure reflected broader resource disparities. American industry produced approximately 47 billion rounds of small arms ammunition during the war. German production totaled approximately 15 billion rounds. American forces could afford to train soldiers thoroughly and to maintain high rates of fire in combat. German forces operated under persistent ammunition constraints that limited both training and tactical options. Private First Class Eugene Sledge, who served with the 1st Marine Division in the Pacific, described the psychological security that abundant ammunition provided in his 1981 memoir, With the Old Breed. We never worried about running out of ammunition. We carried as much as we could physically carry, and we knew that more was always available. This gave us confidence to engage the enemy aggressively. We could suppress positions, maintain covering fire during movement, and generally fight the way we were trained. If we had been conserving ammunition like the Germans or Japanese, our entire tactical approach would have been constrained. The sound of the M1 Garand's ping became so psychologically significant that it appeared in German training films and tactical manuals produced in 1944. One training film, preserved in captured Wehrmacht archives and now held at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, includes a section on American infantry tactics featuring recordings of M1 Garand fire, including the distinctive ping. The narration instructs German soldiers. The American semi-automatic rifle produces a distinctive sound when the ammunition clip ejects. While this indicates the weapon is temporarily empty, soldiers must exercise caution. American infantry operates in coordinated squads where multiple riflemen provide covering fire during reload periods. Attempts to exploit individual reload gaps will likely encounter fire from other squad members. The sound should be noted but not acted upon without careful assessment of the complete tactical situation. This revised guidance, acknowledging that the ping was not actually a significant vulnerability, came too late for thousands of German soldiers who had been killed acting on earlier instructions. Moreover, The caution against exploitation effectively neutered any potential advantage the sound might have provided, transforming it from a perceived weakness into simply noise without tactical meaning. Hauptmann Friedrich Hoffmann, a training officer at the infantry school at Döberitz near Berlin, expressed frustration in a March 1945 letter to his wife. "We have taught our men for 2 years that the American rifle sound indicates vulnerability and that they should attack immediately. Now we tell them the opposite, that the sound is meaningless or possibly a trap. This destroys confidence in all tactical instruction. How can soldiers trust what we teach them when we reverse ourselves so completely? The Americans have turned our own doctrine against us. The close quarters fighting in the Hürtgen forest during the Battle of the Bulge and in German cities during the final months of the war created conditions where the M1 Garand's advantages became most pronounced. Limited visibility, short engagement ranges, and the need for rapid fire during brief target exposures all favored semi-automatic weapons over bolt-action rifles. Technical Sergeant Ralph Puhalovich, who fought in the Hürtgen forest with the 28th Infantry Division, described typical engagements in dense forest. You'd spot a German 30 or 40 meters away, partially concealed behind a tree. With the Garand, you could put 3 or 4 rounds toward him in under 2 seconds, multiple chances to hit. A German with a bolt-action rifle got 1 shot, maybe 2 if he was very fast. In that environment, our rate of fire translated directly into survival. I saw German infantry hesitate to engage because they knew we could put more rounds downrange faster than they could. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 provided the ultimate test of the M1 Garand against German infantry tactics. Wehrmacht forces achieved complete surprise, attacking in overwhelming numbers with significant armor support. American infantry, often isolated and outnumbered, relied on the M1 Garand's firepower to hold positions against German assault waves. Colonel Hurley Fuller, commanding the 110th Infantry Regiment, which bore the brunt of German attacks at the northern shoulder of the Bulge, described the defensive fighting in a 1946 interview. "My regiment held for 3 days against multiple German divisions. We were outnumbered approximately 10 to 1. What saved us was firepower." The M1 Garand allowed individual riflemen to generate suppressive fire equivalent to what would have required multiple bolt-action riflemen. When Germans charged our positions, we could maintain continuous fire that broke up their assault formations before they reached our lines. If we had been armed with bolt-action rifles, we would have been overrun in hours. The cumulative psychological impact on German infantry became evident in interrogation reports from prisoners captured during the final months of the war. Allied interrogators systematically asked captured German soldiers about their perception of American weapons and tactics. The responses revealed consistent patterns of psychological intimidation associated with the M1 Garand. Grenadier Hans Schmidt, captured near the Remagen Bridge in March 1945, told interrogators, "The American rifle was the weapon we feared most. Not their tanks, not their artillery, not their air power. The rifle. Because it meant that every American soldier we faced could fire as fast as our machine gunners, could reload in an instant, and would never run out of ammunition. When we heard that ping sound, we knew Americans were nearby and that engaging them would be suicidal unless we had overwhelming advantage in position or numbers." This fear was not universal. Elite German units, including Fallschirmjäger, paratroopers, and Waffen-SS formations maintained aggressive tactics even when facing American rifle fire. But the average Wehrmacht infantry divisions that bore the brunt of combat in 1944 and 1945 contained increasing percentages of poorly trained replacements, older men, and conscripts from occupied territories. These soldiers lacked the experience and confidence to overcome the psychological intimidation that the M1 Garand's firepower created. Lieutenant Werner Kortenhaus, commanding an infantry platoon in Volksgrenadier Division 326, described the deterioration of combat effectiveness in a diary entry from February 1945. My platoon contains boys of 17 and men over 40. Most have received 8 weeks of training. None have combat experience. When we engage American positions and hear the rapid fire of their semi-automatic rifles, my men go to ground and will not advance regardless of orders. They have been told that charging during American reload periods provides tactical advantage, but they have also been told not to trust this. They solve the contradiction by not charging at all. We cannot attack effectively, only defend and hope the Americans attack us instead. The final irony of the M1 Garand ping phenomenon emerged in post-war historical analysis. Detailed examination of combat actions, after-action reports, and tactical assessments revealed that actual instances of American soldiers being killed or wounded during reload gaps were extraordinarily rare. The supposed vulnerability that German intelligence had identified and German training had emphasized turned out to be largely theoretical, with minimal practical impact. Dr. S.L.A. Marshall, the U.S. Army's chief combat historian during World War II, conducted extensive interviews with infantry units immediately after combat actions. His methodology involved assembling entire units and reconstructing battles through group discussion, identifying who fired when, who moved where, and what tactical decisions were made moment by moment. These interviews, preserved in the Army's historical archives, included questions about reload casualties. Marshall's research found only 3 documented cases where American soldiers were killed or seriously wounded by enemy fire that specifically targeted them during M1 Garand reload periods. In all 3 cases, the soldier was isolated from his unit, making the engagement essentially one-on-one rather than squad-level combat. In contrast, Marshall documented hundreds of cases where enemy forces attempting to exploit perceived reload vulnerabilities were killed by other American soldiers providing covering fire. The mathematical reality was straightforward. The 1.2 to 1.5 second actual reload time was too brief for enemy infantry to exploit in coordinated combat. The squad-level tactics that American infantry practiced meant that individual riflemen were never actually vulnerable. And the fake reload tactic turned the entire concept into a lethal trap. The post-war assessments by German military analysts acknowledged the comprehensive failure of their tactical doctrine regarding the M1 Garand. General Major Friedrich von Mellenthin, who served as Chief of Staff for several panzer armies and wrote extensively about German tactical experiences, addressed the M1 Garand in his 1956 book Panzer Battles. German intelligence made a critical error in assessing the American M1 rifle. We identified a theoretical vulnerability in the weapon's operating system, the audible signature of clip ejection during reloading. We then built tactical doctrine around exploiting this weakness without adequately field testing whether the vulnerability could actually be exploited in combat conditions. The result was doctrine that sent our infantry into suicidal assaults against positions that were never actually vulnerable. This represented intelligence failure, training failure, and command failure. We told our soldiers to do something that would get them killed and called it tactics. The M1 Garand remained in American service through the Korean War, where it proved equally effective against North Korean and Chinese infantry armed with bolt-action rifles and early semi-automatic designs. The weapon was not replaced as the standard American infantry rifle until 1958, when the M14 entered service. Even then, M1 Garands remained in use with Reserve and National Guard units into the 1960s, and the rifle continued to serve various Allied nations for decades afterward. General George Patton, commanding the U.S. Third Army in Europe, provided perhaps the most famous assessment of the M1 Garand during a war bon tour speech in 1945. In my opinion, the M1 rifle is the greatest battle implement ever devised. This quote, widely circulated and frequently referenced, captured the weapon's significance to American infantry effectiveness. But Patton's public praise understated the full extent of the M1 Garand's impact. The rifle had not merely been an effective weapon, it had fundamentally altered the tactical balance between American and German infantry through a combination of genuine firepower superiority and psychological warfare that turned a perceived weakness into a devastating strength. December 18, 1944. Hürtgen Forest, Germany. Unteroffizier Klaus Dietrich survived the engagement that killed 3 of his squad members. He survived by ignoring his training, by refusing to charge when he heard the ping, by recognizing that the doctrine that had been drilled into him was a death sentence disguised as tactics. 2 weeks later, Dietrich was captured near Malmedy during the Battle of the Bulge. American intelligence officers interrogated him about German tactical awareness of American weapons and equipment. His statement was recorded in an interrogation report dated January 3, 1945, and preserved in captured document archives. We were taught that the American rifle makes a sound when empty and that we should attack immediately. This is a lie that killed most of my company. The Americans are never empty. The sound is a trap. When you hear it and charge, you die. When you hear it and stay in position, you also die because the Americans advance and their rate of fire overwhelms you. There is no correct response to the American rifle. You can only hope to survive by avoiding combat with American infantry entirely. This was the ultimate testament to the M1 Garand's effectiveness. Not that it was an excellent weapon, not that it provided significant firepower advantages, but that enemy infantry believed the only way to survive encountering it was to avoid combat altogether. The ping that German soldiers had been taught to exploit became the sound they learned to fear most. The supposed 3-second vulnerability became a psychological trap that killed thousands. The tactical doctrine built around a theoretical weakness encountered the brutal reality that theory and practice were catastrophically different. The M1 Garand won not just through its mechanical excellence, not just through its rate of fire advantage, not just through American industrial capacity that produced millions of them. It won through the combination of genuine tactical superiority and psychological warfare that emerged organically from combat experience. American soldiers, discovering that enemy forces were actively listening for and responding to the reload ping, weaponized that response, turning German tactical doctrine against itself. The weapon's legacy extends beyond its service life, beyond the 5.4 million units produced, beyond the conflicts where it proved its worth. The M1 Garand established the semi-automatic rifle as the minimum acceptable standard for infantry small arms, a standard that every military in the world adopted in subsequent decades. Every modern infantry rifle traces its conceptual lineage to the M1 Garand's revolutionary impact. But the deeper legacy lies in the lesson about tactical doctrine and combat reality. German military intelligence identified what they believed was a significant weakness in American rifle design. They built training and tactical doctrine around exploiting that weakness. They taught thousands of soldiers to risk their lives based on that doctrine. And the doctrine was catastrophically wrong because it was based on theoretical analysis without adequate field validation. American infantry, through practical combat experience, discovered that the supposed weakness was actually exploitable as psychological warfare. They didn't need official guidance or formal tactical doctrine. Combat veterans taught replacements. The information spread through informal networks. The fake reload tactic became standard practice without ever appearing in field manuals. This represented bottom-up tactical innovation, responding to top-down enemy doctrine. The Germans created a vulnerability in their own tactical approach by training their soldiers to respond predictably to specific stimuli. The Americans exploited that vulnerability by triggering the stimuli without creating the conditions the Germans expected. The story of the M1 Garand's ping is ultimately a story about the difference between theory and practice, about the danger of building doctrine around unvalidated assumptions, about the power of practical experience over theoretical analysis. It demonstrates that in warfare, the side that can adapt based on combat reality will defeat the side that remains committed to doctrinal theory regardless of battlefield evidence. Unteroffizier Klaus Dietrich learned this lesson too late to save his squad. The Wehrmacht learned it too late to save thousands of infantry soldiers. But the lesson remains valid decades after the last M1 Garand fired in combat. Listen carefully to what the battlefield teaches. Question doctrine that contradicts experience. Recognize that the enemy's supposed weakness might be their greatest strength, and never assume that a sound, a pattern, or a procedure represents opportunity without validating that assumption through hard experience. The ping of an ejecting M1 Garand clip became the most feared sound in German infantry experience, not because it represented vulnerability, but because it represented everything German tactical doctrine had gotten wrong about American infantry combat power. That metallic chime announced not weakness, but overwhelming firepower, not opportunity, but deadly trap, not tactical advantage, but certain death for those foolish enough to believe what their training had promised. 8 metallic pings ringing out from American positions meant 8 riflemen had just fired 64 rounds in coordinated volleys, were reloading in 1.2 seconds while covered by squad mates, and would resume firing before any charging enemy could cross half the distance to their position. The sound that was supposed to reveal weakness actually announced strength. The vulnerability that was supposed to be exploitable was actually a deception. The tactical doctrine that was supposed to provide advantage actually delivered death. That was why German infantry feared the ping more than the bullets. The bullets killed individuals. The ping killed hope, killed confidence, killed the belief that German tactical training provided answers to American firepower. It announced that nothing in Wehrmacht doctrine prepared them for the reality of fighting American infantry armed with M1 Garands and trained in coordinated squad tactics. It meant that survival required abandoning what they had been taught and improvising new responses that contradicted years of military instruction. The M1 Garand's ping became the sound of American industrial superiority, tactical innovation, and infantry effectiveness, all compressed into a brief metallic chime. It became the audio signature of defeat for German forces who encountered it. It became the most recognizable sound of American military power in World War II. And it achieved this not through engineering design, not through intentional acoustic warfare planning, not through formal tactical doctrine, but through the organic evolution of combat practice, exploiting enemy misconceptions. The ping was never intended as a weapon. Combat veterans made it one by recognizing how enemy forces responded to it and deliberately triggering that response to lethal effect. This transformation from mechanical byproduct to psychological weapon represents perhaps the purest example of tactical adaptation in World War II infantry combat. No general planned it. No engineer designed it. No doctrine prescribed it. Combat soldiers created it through practical experience, validated it through repeated success, spread it through informal networks, and maintained it as standard practice precisely because it worked. The mathematical, mechanical, industrial, and psychological advantages of the M1 Garand all converged in that distinctive ping. The sound that German intelligence thought revealed weakness actually announced every advantage American infantry possessed. Superior rate of fire, coordinated squad tactics, abundant ammunition, thorough training, industrial capacity, and the practical combat intelligence to turn enemy doctrine against itself. Unteroffizier Klaus Dietrich's frozen hesitation that December morning in the Hürtgen forest, watching his comrades die charging toward a sound they had been trained to exploit, captured the complete inversion of German tactical confidence. The Wehrmacht had entered the war, believing their infantry training, tactical doctrine, and combat experience provided qualitative superiority over enemies with greater industrial resources. The M1 Garand and the American infantry who wielded it proved that industrial superiority could create weapons and tactics that made traditional combat experience irrelevant. The ping announced this truth 8 times with every clip ejected, a metallic eulogy for German tactical doctrine and a steel-stamped celebration of American firepower dominance. That sound, more than any other, represented the transformation of World War II from a conflict where tactical skill might overcome material disadvantage into a war where overwhelming firepower, backed by industrial capacity, made traditional military virtues insufficient for victory. The Germans feared the ping more than the bullets, because the bullets could be avoided through skill, courage, and tactical competence. The ping could not be avoided. It announced that American infantry possessed advantages that no amount of German training, experience, or tactical excellence could overcome. It meant that survival required luck rather than skill, that courage meant dying for nothing, that tactical competence was irrelevant when facing an enemy with triple the firepower, and coordinated doctrine that eliminated individual vulnerabilities. That metallic chime became the sound of industrial-age warfare at its most unforgiving. When one side arms every soldier with a weapon so superior that traditional military virtues cannot compensate for the technological disparity. The M1 Garand's ping rang out across battlefields from Normandy to the Rhine, from Guadalcanal to Okinawa, announcing American presence, American firepower, and American inevitable victory. German infantry learned to fear it because it meant death approached with firepower they could not match and numbers they could not overcome. The greatest weapon in the American infantry arsenal proved to be not just the rifle itself, but the sound it made when reloading, transformed through combat experience and psychological warfare into an instrument of terror more effective than any deliberate design could have achieved. That transformation, from mechanical byproduct to feared sound to deadly trap, represents the essence of why the M1 Garand became the weapon that defined American infantry superiority in World War II. 8 metallic pings meant 8 Germans had perhaps 1.2 seconds to live if they followed their training. That was why they feared the sound more than the bullets. The sound meant their training would kill them. The bullets were merely the mechanism.